What if I told you that the fastest lap of the entire 2026 preseason was not a simple boast, but rather a coded message from Ferrari to the rest of the grid? A 1 minute and 16.348 seconds signed by Hamilton in Barcelona set off all the alarms in the paddock. Is it just smoke, or the first sign of a legend's return to the throne? What happened in Barcelona during the last day of the shakedown was no coincidence. It was a gesture orchestrated with surgical precision, planned by Ferrari to send an encrypted message to the rest of the grid. Lewis Hamilton, at the end of a seemingly routine day of systems validation, climbed into the SF26 with a new set of soft tires and stopped the clock at 1 minute and 16.348 seconds. A figure that, in another context, might seem irrelevant. But not here. Not now. And much less with everything that number represented in the ultra-strategic ecosystem of current Formula One. In private tests like the one in Barcelona, lap times are often hidden behind layers of ambiguity. Unknown fuel loads, camouflaged engine maps, unidentified tires, independent work programs. But there are moments that stand out, not because of the number itself, but because of the exact moment in which it occurs. This was one of them. During the week, Ferrari only used 3 of the 5 available days. A decision that, on the surface, could be read as a logistical limitation, or even as an indication of internal problems. But it was neither one nor the other. Ferrari decided to skip the first day for purely strategic reasons. They did not want to be the first to reveal their cards, nor subject their car to unstable weather conditions with no clear correlation with other teams. They wanted to observe, learn, adjust, and when they felt ready, they appeared on the track with a defined plan, collect reliability data, understand the real behavior of the car under the new 2026 regulations, and above all, ensure that all the work carried out in Maranello during the winter was correctly represented on the track. Fred Vasseur does not improvise. His management philosophy is marked by patience, precision, and narrative control. Instead of looking for headlines from the first minute, he structured the test as a story that had to be built step by step. First came the rain, the chaos, the adjustments. Then the mechanical solidity, the long runs, and the accumulation of laps without technical failures. And finally, the emotional outcome, the return. That turn, because by allowing Hamilton to use a new set of tires at the end of the last day, with a dry track, optimal conditions, and a more liberated engine map, Ferrari was breaking the traditional testing script. It was not a search for performance per SE. It was a symbolic act. They were telling the world, this car is capable of being fast, and we know it. That return also functioned as a kind of act of vindication. For Hamilton, who was coming off one of the worst seasons of his career, and for Ferrari, which had been morally devastated after another year without titles or a clear direction. The 1 minute and 16.348 seconds was more than a time. It was a sign that something had changed, that the SF26 project had direction, purpose, and, at least for now, a solid foundation. The interesting thing is that during that same week, other teams like Mercedes accumulated many more laps. In fact, the German team led the total mileage with more than 500 laps completed. But they opted for a radically different approach: racing simulations, heavy loads, energy programs. No real attempt at a fast lap. Ferrari, on the other hand, having completed its own list of internal duties, allowed Hamilton to show a little of the muscle they had tried so hard to hide all winter. And that's what baffled everyone, because if Ferrari was only in Barcelona to validate systems, why release such a competitive fastest lap? Why allow the most popular driver in the world to go out on new tires at the end of the day if times don't really matter? The contradiction between his public statements and his actions on the track set off alarms among rival engineers, technical journalists, and simulation analysts. Some believe that it was a simple political gesture to recover internal morale. Others, that Ferrari is hiding something else. Maybe a technical solution that they don't want to show yet. Or perhaps a design concept that has worked much better than expected. The truth is that during that day, the entire paddock turned its head, because Hamilton was not only faster than his teammate Charles Leclerc by 0.3. He was also faster than any other driver from any other team in the entire week of testing. And that, although it does not directly translate into race pace or points, sends an unmistakable message. Ferrari, for the first time in years, seems to have something to show. When Ferrari finally decided to take to the track at the Barcelona circuit on Tuesday, January 27th, it did so in the worst possible conditions. A few hours into the day, the sky collapsed over Montmello. Clouds, wind, and rain transformed what should have been a controlled start into a wild testing ground. Leclerc ran dry laps briefly during morning, but was only a breeze. At around 10:30, the asphalt was already completely impassable with slicks. And then, Ferrari activated its real test, putting Lewis Hamilton in the SF-26 underwater. There is no simulator in Maranello that can replicate that situation. There is no historical data, no CFD, no wind tunnel that prepares a driver to debut his new car in a completely unknown environment, on a wet track, and with active aerodynamic systems that had never been used in real rainy conditions. But that was exactly what Hamilton faced, and what he accomplished was simply eye-opening. Because while other teams limited their laps or preferred to wait for the weather to improve, Ferrari let Hamilton complete a significant number of kilometers, not with a time objective, nor with intentions of seeking performance. The objective was only one: adaptation. And Hamilton responded masterfully. He stayed on the track for multiple runs, adjusting his driving style to a car completely different from anything he had driven in his almost 2 decades of Formula One. Unlike the Mercedes cars, which were more settled in curves and less reactive, the SF-26 required a livelier, more reactive, and more sensitive to slip driving. And in those wet conditions, every mistake could mean a spin or worse. But Hamilton committed none. At the end of the day, Ferrari had accumulated 121 laps. An impressive figure considering the multiple red flag interruptions and changing weather conditions. But beyond the number, the real value was in the invisible. The information collected by the sensors, the energy maps adjusted in real time, the cooling systems pushed to the limit, the traction control in its first true test in rain, and above all, the fusion between driver and machine. And most importantly, no mechanical failures. Not a single system crashed. Neither in the ERS, nor in the transmission, nor in the active aerodynamic flow control. The technical structure of the SF-26 behaved with a robustness that is rarely seen in the debut of a completely new car under a new regulation. This consistency was Ferrari's first major victory in 2026. It was not only an internal signal for the Maranello engineers, it was also a message to the competition. The car doesn't break point 2 days later, on Thursday. It was time to validate that confidence on a dry track. And what happened was just as impressive. Hamilton, without interruptions, completed a morning session of 85 consecutive laps. And in the afternoon, Leclerc added another 89. Between them, 174 laps. That is the equivalent of almost 3 complete grand prizes in a single day. And again, no reliability issues, no long pit stops, no emergency adjustments. What Ferrari had built in theory was working in practice. And all of that happened without the need to set impressive lap times. Not yet, because the true story of those days was not in the stopwatch, but in the invisible, in the data, in the integration, in the trust gained silently in the rain. This SF-26 is not an easy car, nor does it seek to be. It does not pretend to have a neutral behavior, nor hide its limits behind artificial stability. It is a car that requires hands, aggressiveness, precision. A car that may be indomitable for others, but for a driver like Hamilton, it is a perfect tool to attack. And those types of cars, historically, are the ones that have defined their golden eras. For now, in Barcelona, the synergy was evident. But the question many are asking is how long that peace can last if Hamilton's DNA continues to define the technical future of the project. How far is Ferrari willing to sacrifice neutrality for adaptation? And to what extent will Charles Leclerc tolerate that inclination? The only thing certain is that Ferrari is no longer building cars in a vacuum. You are designing for a purpose. And that purpose has a name and surname. The fast lap of 1 minute and 16.348 seconds was no coincidence. It was the first glimpse of a tailor-made concept. One that, for the first time in years, appears to have given Lewis Hamilton the kind of car he needs to make history once again. What happened in Barcelona was not just about a quick lap. It was a silent statement, an encrypted message that only those who understand the deep language of Formula One can interpret in its full magnitude. Because when a team like Ferrari, historically loaded with symbolic, technical, and emotional weight, decides to show its hand, even partially, it does so for a reason. That lap of 1 minute and 16.348 seconds by Lewis Hamilton was the spark that ignited a series of debates that still rage within the paddock. Was this simply a public relations strategy to change the narrative after a catastrophic season? Or was it a controlled leak of what Ferrari really has in store for 2026? The fascinating thing is that, so far, both versions can be true at the same time. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.